And so nice to have you with us. I'm Josh Morrow with Dennis Williams, and this is the Back Nine, Midlife Best Life. We have a really good show today. We're going to be talking, and an important one, I think, too. We're talking about co-parenting. But before we get to that, I want to, Dennis, pick up where we left off last week. So the
story gets better.
The story gets a little bit better. So last week, before we brought in Coach Soto, it was really frenetic getting here into the studio. It was, there were some business fires that you were putting out.
Yes.
We had a separate business meeting about 45 minutes away from here.
It was raining.
It was raining. It was lunchtime. And we got in here like right at the time we were supposed to start with Coach. But we stopped at Chick-fil-A.
We stopped at Chick-fil-A.
With a crazy drive-through there.
The drive-through in the Delray Chick-fil-A makes no sense to me. It's like they put it, I don't even understand it the way it's set up. And I don't even know why anybody ever goes. Because it's so frenetic to try and get in and out of there. But anyway, we did that.
And it never fails. When you're in a hurry, the guy in front of you is ordering for the entire football team.
Yes.
It took forever to order that. Forever. And it's pouring.
So here's how good a friend Josh is.
Yeah. So from that point,
we not only does he buy lunch, we pull out of there, and I'm still putting out this fire on this work call. I'm listening to this call. I'm going on and off on mute while I'm driving. So I have one hand, like sometimes on my phone, one hand on the steering wheel, trying to pay attention. We're in a hurry to get to the studio to start our first podcast. He is literally feeding me French fries.
Waffle fries.
He's handing me waffle fries so that I can eat those.
Like I'm handing Cheerios to a toddler.
Exactly. And then we get to the studio and it's pouring. So I pull up to the front so he can walk in. He walks in. I'm begging to wrap up this call. Really important clients, but they got to know that I have a hard out at 1. So I think the call ends at like 1:01. I ate a Chick-fil-A sandwich faster than I guarantee you I set the Guinness Book of World Records for eating a Chick-fil-A sandwich in maybe 3 bites. I'm sure somebody's done it faster, but it was really fast. Too.
Like I want to call up Joey Chestnut, and I've met him, by the way.
Yeah.
And find out how long it takes him to eat a Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, it was. I ate it so fast, and
it was a big one. It was a healthy patty with a good size. It was actually spilling over the edges of the buns, which doesn't always happen.
Yeah, so that was
impressive.
it. Josh fed me fries. I ate a Chick-fil-A sandwich in about 2 seconds, and then we came in here and did our show last week, and now we're doing our second show of the week. So. It's all good.
It was amusing and funny, and amazing that you didn't vomit. But
everything
I'm
was
proud
good
of
with
you.
the client. I know all of you were wondering on the edge of your seat on me putting out the client fire.
And your team was amazing.
All worked out.
By the way,
you got to listen to my whole team in action putting out fires. So,
I don't know now how we make a smooth and effortless transition to our esteemed guest.
Have you ever had a Chick-fil-A sandwich?
What's your favorite Chick-fil-A order? But our guest is Dr. Barbara Kelly, who was a colleague of, or recommended to us by our friend Colette Fair and Laura Bowman. And we have wanted to talk about this topic for a long time. It's the idea of co-parenting through divorce, after divorce, and at the various stages of and ages that your kids may be in the entirety of the process. And it's particularly relevant because, in the weeks ahead, I have to share space with my ex over a graduation. You have a daughter who's getting married, engaged, so there's going to be a lot of all of those things too. So Dr. Kelly, thank you for joining us. I don't know, how you feel about somebody eating a Chick-fil-A sandwich that quickly. Is that a good role model for a father to be providing for his children? But let's start with just the basics of it. How big an issue in your practice have you seen, struggles around co-parenting when parents first split?
I kind of wanted to start with saying that there were so many good kind of themes in your Chick-fil-A story that just apply to co-parenting, being under the gun, having a time restraint, being under fire, trying to juggle a bunch of different things. Each of you sort of having a different role in that moment in the car, and then being flexible and pulling together some teamwork. So I kind of loved it. And I had a good laugh to start this afternoon, so I appreciate that too.
That's great. We'll take that a step further. So you talk about the chaos of co-parenting. It's not smooth. So how should people look at it to start? What are the most important basics?
Yeah, so I think a good model for the co-parenting relationship is to think about a casual business relationship that you might have. I will say I exclude personal trainers, facial, nail techs. Those can be kind of intimate sharing casual business relationships, but really pick a good casual business relationship where you have some clear expectations. There's some clear boundaries. You think about how you communicate when and where. The difference is in the co-parenting relationship, you have all this history and emotionality that's kind of in the background that you're trying to back out, but it is going to bubble up, even under the best of circumstances from time to time, and just know and expect that and be prepared to handle it.
How do you help? Maybe I should ask this question first. What are the issues that a guy is going to feel in those first few months, that first year of being separated, and now there's shared space, shared a new apartment that you're living in that is not really yours, but there's space for your kids, shared pickup and drop off, and shared shuttling back and forth to sports and dance and arts, etc. Maybe you can talk about what a guy is like. I'm sure it's true for women too, but what do men tend to feel most prominently in their emotions?
Yeah. And the scenario you kind of paint, I think a lot of men feel a really steep learning curve because they're starting to take on potentially some responsibilities they weren't taking on in that same time frame before. Sometimes dads feel like they don't really have a home for the kids, or the kids really prefer, if they're still in the former marital home with mom, like that's really their home. Are they really going to be comfortable with me? They can feel some inadequacy about that. Sometimes there's some anxiety about just maintaining contact with your kids, because just depending on what marital roles look like, sometimes moms are the ones that are conveying a lot of information. There's just this huge learning curve between communicating with your kids, getting them where they need to go, continuing with your work, which is important because oftentimes you're still a primary supporter for the family, even as a divorced family, and restructuring your own social and emotional life. For parents who are in that transition phase, especially men, I think, can struggle with building that social support that they need and reaching out and getting help. So it just really places them at risk for internalizing more, or sometimes inadvertently leaning on their kids for social or emotional support.
So you mentioned looking at it as a business relationship, and I like that because I was given that same advice, and I've given that advice to other friends of mine that have been going through divorce. And what it does is it takes, a lot of the emotion out of it. So where the emotion for me was the hardest, and I think for a lot of people, even when you do look at it like a business relationship, is around money. What do you do around that situation when the angst comes around who gets what and the financial part of it kicks in?
Yeah. Are you thinking kind of in that initial divorce phase?
Yeah. When you're going through trying to figure out financial, like all of that stuff. People get emotional just in general in life about money. That could have broken a marriage, right? Money. So all of the emotions that go around that, you give people to work through the emotions around money.
Yeah. Yeah. So during that, there's a reality. You're really kind of highlighting on a kind of an important phase of that divorce stage. During the legal process where you're making those decisions, it's really normal for co-parenting communication to go down, for co-parenting to be really rough. Sometimes people are communicating more through their lawyers if they're having that type of a divorce. And sometimes there's a lot of confusion because things aren't clear yet. The agreement isn't clear yet. And so if parents can, as much as possible, separate the kids' issues and the co-parenting from the financial conversations as much as you can, it's not easy, but you can put some general guidelines in place, such as not having those two conversations at the same time, scheduling kind of your co-parenting communication, getting a good interim agreement in place with some clear expectations for everybody, how you're just going to handle things in the interim basis, setting some boundaries in terms of what you discuss when the kids are around and at kid events, and how you're going to go forward.
That leads to another question. Dennis is talking about finances, but you're sort of also talking about, social expectations, right? What happens when you show up separately to an event and here are all these other couples that you've been friends with for years, probably mostly through the kids, and you don't kind of know, well, do I get to stand with this couple? Do I have to sit at the other end of the bleachers? I know I experienced that to a degree, and it was not necessarily easy to go through. So maybe you can talk about how typical is that? How do you help, both the fathers and the moms kind of manage those social situations? Because they can be really awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. If parents can do it or spouses can do it, taking some time around divorce planning and how you're going to handle that and having a space for those conversations is really helpful. So some of the things we talk about in my office is when and who and how we're going to tell other people, what kind of boundaries we're going to set around that as a couple. There may be a time frame when you're very active in the divorce process where you may let certain people know, but you're going to say, we're working it through. We're just asking that everybody respect our privacy during this time till we kind of get on the other side. When events come up, sometimes parents aren't talking as much or they're unsure, and we just touch base and we kind of choreograph it a little bit. Which events is everybody comfortable going to together? And those are mostly kid events. How are we going to handle those children events? Do the kids know? Do they not know? What are we going to tell people or not tell people? And then if it's joint events, it's really around finding that sweet spot between being able to attend events, being able to provide continuity, but doing it in a way where we're pretty still in that safe zone that we're not going to inflame conflict or tension or stress. And so sometimes even if you want to go to an event, if you know you're going to get really unhappy, really stressed, it's going to be really unpleasant, you're at risk for drinking too much or expressing emotion inappropriately, it's better to, for right now, not go. And then we can reevaluate that.
Yeah.
Doc, what if you're the one that is doing the work and this can go either way and the other person isn't? You're really working hard on yourself. You're going to therapy. You are challenging yourself to be better and be good in these situations. And your counterpart's not interested in any of that. There's bitterness, whatever. I'm not going to pigeonhole one thing, but the other person's just not working on themselves and they obviously have issues too. What do you do in that particular case?
Yeah, so first of all, it's hard and it's frustrating and it doesn't feel fair. So
Right.
we can acknowledge all of those things. And then you can only deal with what you have control over. You really can only deal with what you have control over. So sometimes I see parents trying to overcompensate. For example, my child's other parent isn't doing great. They're not working on themselves, or maybe they're out, having too much fun. They're not bringing healthy food in the house. So I'm just going to make sure in my house, my kid only gets super healthy meals, for example, or we follow certain rules here to kind of make up for that over discipline or under discipline in the other house. And what ultimately happens for your kid is your kid has 2 out of balance homes instead of 1 in balance home. So as much as you can focus on your side of the street, your lane, you're going to provide a better environment for your kids.
It's really good.
Is that similar for narrative? One of the things when I got divorced, I was for the most part 1,200 miles away most of the time. And I had no control over the narrative, nor should I really, of what my ex was saying about the dissolution of our relationship. And what she said to friends, I didn't care. That's not in my control. She has every right to her version of the story. And I should also say, I have no idea what she said or didn't say. I'm not casting aspersions here. But I did care about what she was saying to my children and in front of my daughters about what had happened. And so how do you, knowing that was out of my control, and I know that happens to a lot of guys, I don't know that it happened for me, where things are being said that are not fair and are nasty in many ways. How can anybody gain that trust back with their children to make sure that their truth is told and heard?
Yeah. So there's varying degrees of that from, ones I think that people can address fairly successfully, although there's hurt there and there can be damage there, all the way up to something that might be a little bit more impossible without some outside help. But in general, I will tell you that when I talk to kids, Even when they have a mom, let's say we'll take the example of mom saying negative things to them about dad, and they go and spend time with dad, and dad, wants to defend himself or kind of get his side of the story in. And kids, it just deflates kids. What kids say to me is, I just want to spend time with my dad and not hear negative things about my mom or not talk about the divorce. And so there is a place for, especially with younger kids, they just want to go enjoy their time with they just does not feel good to them to hear negative things from either parent about the other parent. And they may not say it, they may not push back, but it really doesn't. And so also engaging in that isn't helpful. I do think you can, if a child brings it up to you, or if you want to kind of approach it, and again, these are nuanced. And so I think if people are thinking about some of this or in that situation, it does help to get some outside help. But you can use more neutral things that can also help your kids with their own critical thinking, which is to say, if they say, mom says you're not going to give us enough money, or mom says you did this or you did that, or dad says whatever, you can say to your kids sometimes something like, you know how mom and I don't always see things the same way? This is one of those things, for example, without going into it, but letting them know that you see it differently. I've had kids in my office that have had two really warring parents, a lot of high conflict. They've been exposed to it. And especially for younger kids, they're trying to figure out who's telling the truth and who's not telling me the truth. And so, for example, I've had kids say to me, Dr. Kelly, who's telling what do you think really happened? Or who do you think is telling the truth? And my response oftentimes is something to the effect of, and they'll say, what do you think? And I'll say, I think sometimes when people in your family get angry or upset, they don't always handle it the right way. What do you think? And they'll kind of nod, I agree. And then I'll say, what does that feel like for you? And that's really where they want you to be as a parent, because kids have real feelings. And if you can get to having the emotional conversation with them and meeting them where they are emotionally, what they're really concerned about, that's how you're really going to connect. Mm-hmm. And that's how you really protect and develop and make your relationship with them.
I love that. Thanks.
I do too. So we've talked a lot about it. I'd love, different ranges, right? You've said a couple of times, especially if the kids are young. I'm just going to, you're my therapist right now for a second, okay? I have older grown kids. I've been divorced for pretty much 10 years, we'll call it 9 years. My oldest is getting married now. I've had almost no interaction with my ex-wife, but now it's coming. It's coming in the next year and a half. So, walk me through some tips that I should know. I feel like I'm good and I'll be fine, but maybe there's some things that you can help me with that I should know going in.
Yeah. Even with adult children, we still can think about how do we, help them with that. So I'll tell you a few things that I do hear from young adult children. I don't know where your kids are on this or your daughter is on this, but sometimes, what kids don't get are family pictures with just them and their parents or their family. And so sometimes just communicating with your kid that hey, it's okay with me, whatever combination of family pictures you want to put together or those kinds of things. You can think about what your expectations are that you want to set in advance. I don't know if you and your co-parent or former wife still communicate, but if is there a touch base ahead of time in some way just to see where you each are and kind of, hey, how do we want to navigate this for our daughter in a way that's good for her? What are some things we can do? I don't know if you guys have talked about that. But kids, really, best thing we can do is take that pressure off the kids to understand that we're going to show up in a way that's positive and focused for them. And we're going to respect what they want to have happen at their wedding and do the best we can to support that.
And beyond that, what do you do when there is a sharp disagreement, whether it's around a big event for an adult and grown child, like a wedding or a graduation, or whether they're still in school and we're really talking about helping them build their fundamental building blocks? What if there's stark disagreement between one parent and another about what's best for the kid, what's best for the event, regardless of narrative, regardless of money, but it's really something that's fundamental about their growth. How can parents who are not together as a couple come together for the betterment of the child when they starkly disagree?
So there is a point where sometimes it's helpful to have a third party help you communicate. I'm just going to say that again. But in lieu of that, there's some of the strategies that I use with parents is if you can't really even sit near each other or even look at each other, instead of sitting on opposite sides of the auditorium or the stage or the event, sit front row and back row, something like that. So your kid is at least looking in one direction and not having to look back and forth across a big expanse, for example. Make sure that your child knows they can come, if it's a younger child, they're going to be in time sharing with one parent or the other. Make sure that child knows they can go and spend time with that other parent and say hi and be comfortable to do that. You can send, if it has to be in writing, you can always set out something in an email communication of saying, this is when we're coming, this is when we're leaving, and kind of laying out those kinds of expectations again.
That's good. That's good. So what about when you get older and there's like you've been married? So one thing we have not touched on in this show very much is people even older than us getting divorced. But a lot of that happens in this area. We're in Florida, right? So we see 60-somethings and 70-something-year-olds after 40 years of marriage or whatever splitting up. How does the dynamic change in that particular case?
Yeah. So we do
Might
see
have
a lot.
grandkids involved, right? Like this point, right? Yeah.
Grandkids, and then oftentimes, even in this age group, you'll have a spouse taking care of their husband or wife's
there you go.
parents, even, financially, or being the one that drives them to their appointments, their doctor's appointments and things like that. And it is a nationwide phenomenon too, by the way. We're seeing it kind of nationwide, but we certainly do a lot of that work here. So I've had different experiences with different couples. Sometimes there is a situation where kids may take sides for one reason or the other. And so one parent is kind of struggling a little bit with mending those relationships or figuring out how they're going to stay in touch with those relationships. And most of the work that I do for older adults, we're working on a pretty cooperative divorce. So we're talking about that in advance and how we're going to support and maintain those relationships. And bringing in adult kids into the conversation if we need to. I actually do see some aging parents with their adult children and kind of couples therapy sometimes. And we do talk and work through those issues.
The sandwich generation.
Yeah. It affects the kids too, right? When parents get divorced in their 60s and 70s, for sure, right?
For sure.
Dr. Kelly, we have focused a lot on negotiating and managing the negative. We've seen many couples get divorced and work extremely productively together. My parents divorced when I was 6, and they were always, whatever differences they had, they were always very successful at being able to put them aside when it came to me. And I just am amazed by that in so many ways. Going back to when parents are first getting divorced, how can they, besides the discussions around the expectations, how can they come together to build that productivity, that positivity, so that they're able to get along in that way? What are the other steps that they can take to help create a healthy environment for themselves and for the children?
Yeah. So that's the first one is the one that I think I've heard you guys identify on other podcasts with other people in any of these situations, which is working on yourself first. So you're working through your own stuff, because because being able to emotionally regulate and manage your emotions is going to be important in this relationship. And when stuff comes up, when your emotions get triggered, you are oftentimes going to respond disproportionately and defensively. And so working on your own pieces, identifying what you still haven't resolved is helpful. If there has been a betrayal or a real hurt, either through how the divorce decision was made or for the reason of the marriage breaking down, we don't have to resolve all of that. But if there's a way for some repair work to happen on a go forward, that can also be really helpful. Focus on what you can control, your side of the street. The parenting plan is important in terms of talking things through. What I tell the folks I work with is I'm not as concerned about what your parenting plan says as much as I'm concerned that you're both interpreting it the same way. Have a conflict repair plan, how you're going to meet, when you're going to talk, how you're going to communicate about things. And we have some specific tools or guidelines that I give for email communication. And then I have a phrase that I that a colleague of mine, Dr. Deborah Gilman, uses that I love, which is we're focusing on repair over perfection.
I love that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Focus on repair over perfection. I love that. What are some techniques that you would use? People run really hot, right? You know, in these situations, everybody's emotional, and it's very, you know, some people have a quick trigger and you know, emotionally react. Are there you know, other than like counting to 5, right? Are there other like things that you would say to people so that they can react and respond in a responsible way, especially as it pertains to their kids?
Yeah, so at a very basic level, I like the word wait. Just tell yourself, wait, why am I texting? Why am I talking? And just
Why am I? Yeah. Great acronym.
And so it's just a great word to have kind of present. It's taking the breath. It's also, you know, again, that own work to tell when you are getting hot. And sometimes we make mistakes and we step in it and it escalates. And that's the point at which anyone can end that at any time and be the one to say, okay, I'm going to step away. I'm going to hang up. This isn't productive. Can I call you tomorrow and we'll finish?
You know what I found, which is so interesting about that, is in many of my conflicts, and this goes just beyond just maybe with my ex or with my kids, is that less is more. You know, you know, less is more. Sometimes when you just don't say anything or say very, very little, there's a lot of power in that. Would you agree with that?
I think absolutely. It's important what we say as much as what we don't say, and then how much we listen. You know, the other, I think, ingredient to the recipe of success is showing up with as much curiosity as you can, because the more judgment you show up with, you don't let your co-parent make any changes, and you make assumptions that you'll then feed into that will come true.
Yeah, there have been a handful of situations where I can remember where I was in a conflict with my ex, and where there was a conversation that was being held, and I was like, I think we should have this discussion later. And being able to pull away from that, and that helped us get to a solution because it helped. Who knows why one or the other of us was triggered? It could have had nothing to do with the actual event that we were arguing about, right? But something else from somewhere in our lives, and I think that's something, Dr. Kelly, that's important to recognize too, is that, you know, we tend, when we're especially in the early stages of divorce, when we're in conflict, we channel so much of the resentment into that dissolution of our marriage, when the triggers could very easily be coming from some other form of stress or dissatisfaction.
And similarly with co-parenting or parenting, when there's all that conflict there that we're focused on, we can attribute things that are going on with the kids to that conflict, and we can miss important things that are happening with the children, because they do have real feelings, and they want to know you hear them, and that you want to help them do something about those feelings. And sometimes we can just say, oh gosh, you sound like your mom, or you're talking to me like your dad did, or you're having trouble in math because dad didn't do your homework with you. And really this kid is struggling for other reasons.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, really great to have you, Dr. Kelly. This has been absolutely terrific to have you on and sharing these insights with us. Very different than most of our shows, but very, very important. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Great to get to know you, and I look forward to talking to you further.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take
bye.
care.
All right, that's Dr. Barbara Kelly, and you know, that was what I was hoping we would get out of that. There's so many guys need to hear that. I can remember, both of us. I can remember me advising you. I can remember you advising me in moments of conflict with our former spouses, because it's tricky. It's really difficult, especially in those first few months and weeks when you're trying to figure out everything else in your life, your relationship with your children, your relationship with all of your former friends. And there's lots of issues that pop up. And, you know, so much of her advice, I think, is really, having been through it, I think really applies to the situations.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you what helped me, and this helped me in both my breakups, you know, my ex and then my other long-term relationship, was the less is more. And what I mean by that is in breakups, a lot of times the other person will say, this is how you should be doing things. this is how you should be. Like they'll tell you like, how you should be doing something or how you should be acting or whatever. And that's a trigger for me.
Of course.
Like that's a big trigger.
Me too.
But instead of responding to it, I'm just like, oh, okay, that's your opinion. Like that's the switch that I flipped was you're allowed to have that opinion. That's how I should act. You think that, but it doesn't mean it's right. So that's where I got to. It took me a while, but it got to the point where you can say whatever you want about what I should be doing, but I know what I should be doing, and I'm going to go by my true north and not by what you think I should be doing.
Well, and for our guys out there who are in the throes of divorce or whatever, it's a lot easier to do now than it is when you're first in it, right? Because when you're first in it, one of the things that I think happens to us in divorce is we've really lost our sense of self, right? We're trying to figure out who we are now as a single guy, 20 years later after having last been a single guy, and having been a couple in between. We're not trying to figure out where our relevance is. What of our values are meaningful? It's easy to be gaslit, either intentionally or unintentionally. I know there were times when I was gaslit intentionally, and I know there were times when the intention was harmless, but I was so insecure and unsure of myself that I took something most certainly the wrong way. So that's where that healing part really comes in. Everybody said, what does that mean? What does it mean to do the work? When you do the work, because you get to this point where you're confident enough to be able to say, yeah, that's your opinion. This is how I'm going to do things for me.
Right. I love the WAIT acronym. I mean,
yes, great.
That's fantastic. And I think it's great advice. Even Josh, if you're just going through it, I mean, we're here to help the people to learn from what we went through. And I would say, like, if you're going through it right now and you're confrontational or something, what the other person says is an opinion. Just remember that. Remember that it's an opinion. It doesn't mean it's true, right? If they're trying to tell you to act a certain way or be a certain way or this is what you're supposed to do, it doesn't mean it's the right thing.
And you don't have to respond immediately, right? You don't have to respond with a lot of words. You used to say fewer lines in my play. I've adopted that. I think it's terrific. You don't have to give that person room, and you don't have to respond with lots of words. No is a complete sentence, right? Or this is how I feel about it, period. And that's the end. You don't have to make excuses or long explanations. I think also we get through those stages, right, where it's, that first year-ish and beyond that. But now we have big things coming up, right? You have a wedding for your daughter. Some of these things may come up again because, families are getting close again, and there's a lot of emotional importance to it. Everybody has an opinion about, well, this should look like this. Your daughter has thoughts about what she wants the wedding to be, et cetera. And so it's important to have that grounding as you come into this stage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you said bears repeating because we have not talked about it in a long time. And that is you are writing your story and you do not have to give certain people any lines, a couple lines, a small part, a big part. You're deciding who has the roles, who is playing the parts. I'm expanding upon what you said. It's something that you brought up, and I feel like we haven't talked about it in a while, but it's a really important thing that I have to remind myself of too. And not just, this isn't just X's or anything. This is like every part of your life. Every part of your life, you can say to yourself, that person that is annoying me at work, or that client who's giving me a hard time, like, I don't have to give them as many lines in my play. I can write them out or at least give them less breath. So to me, it's such an important lesson, and I need to kind of get back to it sometimes and regroup and remember it.
Yeah, we can step into our own power in that regard. We don't have to do it in a way that's nasty or unpleasant, just firm. Yeah. This is my value system, and I'm going to stick to it. Can I close with two optimistic things here? So one is, when my parents got divorced, I was 6. They both remarried, and my mom got remarried to my stepfather much, much later, but he was in my life about the time my dad and my stepmother got married. So all have been in my life a long time. And that can't have been easy, right? For all of them to get together. And they did. I mean, they did high holidays together, and they came to events together. And I very much feel like I had 4 parents, from almost they're all still living. For all of my life from the time I was 9 years old when my stepfather first stepped into my life until now. And so I feel very much that I benefited from that. And so my thoughts to you, parents who are going through divorce now or who have been divorced, if you can find a way to put your own egos aside to be able to do that, I think that can be really beneficial to the child. you want to comment on that?
Keep going. No, keep
So
going.
the other story is totally separate, which is as we step into this stage, we tell you have a wedding coming. I have a big graduation coming up. My younger daughter's graduating from college. And as we start to, this will probably actually air after the graduation. But, and my relationship with my ex has been, it's had its turbulent moments, but it's cordial. It's not warm. We're not singing, we haven't sung Kumbaya around the campfire. But at the graduation, we might, because she and her husband, who I've talked about on the show as this guy I very much like. He's a good influence in my daughter's lives. They've invited us to stay. They have a second property that's very close to the school where my daughter's graduating, and they've invited us to have sort of the celebratory dinner the night before, and for us to be able to stay in the house, which was incredibly generous. It's a really nice thing to be able to do. I appreciate it. We've accepted, and so we're going to go see how that goes. And so I think, again, maybe we do sing Kumbaya around the fire. Maybe we blow each other up with fireworks. Who knows? But in all seriousness, I think I'm optimistic about the fact that, that there's positivity, and we can all be there for the support of our kids. And I hope that that's the same for most of our audience too.
And it's funny that you say that, because I was going to end with the same thing. Mm-hmm. I am incredibly optimistic about how everything's going to work together with my ex and my firstborn, who's the first one to get married.
Unbelievable.
And all of the things that are going to surround that. I'm very optimistic and very happy. Everything we talked about is sort of in the past.
Yeah.
And I'm only looking forward. So I'm very, very looking forward to all of it, and us being able to celebrate the person who it's really about, which is my daughter. It's not about us, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Just like graduation's not about you guys.
That's right. It's about
and
her.
Just like, this wedding's not going to be about us. So we just need to stay in the background, stay cool, and I think everything will work out.
And we hope that for all of our listeners who are going through it or have been through it. So good luck with everything with that. I know it's going to be good. I think it's going to be good. Thank you so much. Thanks to Dr. Barbara Kelly. She was terrific. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on The Back Nine.